Title: When Honor Turns to Envy. 10 Biblical Warnings About Outshining Your Master. Part 1. Joseph and His Brothers, the Dreamer Who Provoked Jealousy. Persons and places: Joseph, Jacob, Israel. Joseph's brothers: Canaan, later Egypt, Genesis 37. Summary of the story. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son in Canaan. Jacob gave him a special coat of many colors, and Joseph also had dreams that suggested he would one day rule over his family. He told these dreams openly to his father and brothers. His brothers' jealousy grew until they sold him into slavery, and he was taken to Egypt. Signs of outshining the master. Visible favoritism. Joseph was clearly preferred by Jacob, which already placed him in a position above his brothers. Boasting. Even if naive, Joseph related dreams that implied his father and brothers would bow to him. Genesis 37 verses 5 to 11. Lack of discretion. He shared his dreams repeatedly, even after seeing his brother's irritation. It signaled a kind of rising status in God's plan that outshone the rest of the family. Consequences. Hatred and betrayal. His brothers grew to hate him, yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Genesis 37 verse 8. Sold into slavery. They eventually cast him into a pit and sold him to Ishmaelite traders going to Egypt. Genesis 37 verses 27 to 28. Family torn and deceived. Jacob was devastated, convinced his beloved son was dead. Lessons learned. Great favor and gifting may be true, but broadcasting it without wisdom provokes envy. In family and authority structures, even if you are chosen or gifted, a humble and discreet approach helps prevent destructive jealousy. God still fulfilled His purpose for Joseph, but the path was harsher due in part to how openly his superior destiny was revealed. Part 2. King Saul and David, the warrior who became a threat. Persons and places: Saul, David. Women of Israel: Gibeah. Various battlefields: Israel, 1 Samuel 18. Summary of the story. David killed Goliath and became a national hero. King Saul initially loved David and kept him close, but after David's victories, women in Israel sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." 1 Samuel 18 verse 7. Saul's heart turned from affection to deadly jealousy. Signs of outshining the master. Public praise that surpassed the king. The comparison in song ranked David above Saul. Rising popularity. David's success in battle made him more admired than Saul. Skill and charisma. David was competent in war and music, soothing Saul's troubled spirit, yet becoming more impressive in the process. Consequences. Saul's murderous envy. Saul eyed David from that day forward and tried multiple times to kill him. 1 Samuel 18 verses 9 to 11. David's exile and constant danger. David became a fugitive, fleeing from place to place, wilderness of Ziph and Gedi, etc. Torn kingdom. Saul's insecurity weakened the unity of Israel and set the stage for civil tension. Lessons learned. Those in power often resent being eclipsed, even by someone loyal. High achievement and applause can make a faithful servant look like a rival. David's wisdom lay in refusing to retaliate against Saul, showing that if you unintentionally outshine your master, you must be doubly careful to honor and not challenge them. Part 3. Absalom and David, the son who stole hearts. Persons and places: Absalom, King David. Jerusalem, Hebron, 2 Samuel 15. Summary of the story. Absalom, David's son, slowly turned the hearts of Israel away from his father. He stood at the city gate in Jerusalem, promising better justice than what people expected from David's administration. Eventually, he openly declared himself king at Hebron. Signs of outshining the master. Public relations campaign. Absalom greeted people personally, embraced them, and presented himself as more accessible than the king. 2 Samuel 15 verses 2 to 6. Implied criticism of David. "See, your matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear you." 2 Samuel 15 verse 3, suggesting he, Absalom, would do better, creating an alternate power center, gathering a group that favored him over David. Consequences. Civil war. David was forced to flee Jerusalem. Israel was split. Absalom's death. Caught by his hair in an oak tree in the forest of Ephraim, he was killed by Joab. 2 Samuel 18 verses 9 to 15. Deep grief in David's house. David mourned bitterly, crying, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom." 2 Samuel 18 verse 33. Lessons learned. Trying to outshine and replace legitimate authority, especially a father or king, often leads to disaster. Gaining admiration at the expense of your master may win temporary hearts, but invites conflict and judgment. Honor, correction, and succession must be handled with respect. Ambition without submission destroys families and nations. Part 4. Korah versus Moses, challenging spiritual leadership. Persons and places: Korah, Dathan, Abiram, Moses, Aaron, wilderness. Numbers 16. Summary of the story. Korah, a Levite, gathered 250 leaders and challenged Moses and Aaron, claiming that all the congregation was holy and that Moses had taken too much authority for himself. Signs of outshining the master. Questioning the uniqueness of Moses' calling. You take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy. Numbers 16:3. Organizing a rival group of leaders, forming a coalition to confront Moses and Aaron. Minimizing God's choice. By insisting equality, they were effectively saying Moses was no more chosen than anyone else. Consequences. The earth opened and swallowed Korah, Dathan, and Abiram with their households. Numbers 16:31, 33. Fire from the Lord consumed the 250 men who offered incense. Numbers 16:35. A plague on the complaining congregation. Many died until Aaron intervened with incense. Lessons learned. Not every call for equality is righteous. Sometimes it hides envy of leadership. Spiritual authority is not a game of status. Challenging God-ordained leaders out of pride brings severe judgment. Distinguish between humble questions and rebellious aspirations to outshine those God has placed in front. Part 5. Miriam and Aaron against Moses, resenting a chosen one. Persons and places: Moses, Miriam, Aaron, wilderness. Numbers 12. Summary of the story. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married, but the deeper issue was jealousy of Moses' unique relationship with God. Signs of outshining the master. Subtle challenge to Moses' spiritual rank. Has the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Has he not spoken also by us? Numbers 12:2. Attempt to level status. They wanted their prophetic role to be seen as equal to Moses' unique prophetic office. Questioning personal decisions as a way to undermine authority. Using his marriage as a pretext. Consequences. Divine rebuke. God called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the tent of meeting and clearly affirmed Moses' special status. Numbers 12:48. Miriam's leprosy. She became leprous, white as snow, and had to be shut out of the camp 7 days. Numbers 12:10-15. Delay in the journey. The people did not move until Miriam was brought in again. Lessons learned. Jealousy of someone else's closeness to God can masquerade as righteous critique. Even in a family, attempting to outshine the chosen leader spiritually can bring painful discipline. True greatness before God is in meekness, like Moses, who is described as very meek. Numbers 12:3. Part 6. Adonijah and Solomon, grasping at the throne. Persons and places: Adonijah, Solomon, Bathsheba, Nathan, King David, Jerusalem. 1 Kings 1-2. Summary of the story. Adonijah, one of David's sons, tried to set himself up as king when David was very old. However, David had already chosen Solomon to succeed him. Later, Adonijah made a request that led Solomon to see him as a continuing threat. Signs of outshining the master. Self-promotion before official succession. Adonijah exalted himself, saying, "I will be king." 1 Kings 1 verse 5. Gathering supporters. He enlisted Joab and Abiathar the priest. Later, a subtle power move. He asked Bathsheba to request Abishag the Shunammite as his wife. 1 Kings 2 verses 13-17. A move that in royal culture could look like a claim to the throne. Consequences. Initial coronation of Solomon. David publicly declared Solomon king to thwart Adonijah's move. 1 Kings 1 verses 32-40. Adonijah spared but warned. Solomon initially showed mercy, saying he would live if no wickedness was found in him. 1 Kings 1 verse 52. Adonijah's eventual execution. Solomon saw his request regarding Abishag as a renewed attempt to secure the crown and had him put to death. 1 Kings 2 verses 22 to 25. Lessons learned. Trying to seize a role before it is given is a form of outshining your rightful master. Even after mercy, continued indirect challenges to authority invite final judgment. Waiting for God's timing and honoring legitimate succession protects both your life and your legacy. Part 7. Haman and Mordecai. Pride that couldn't tolerate another's honor. Persons and places. Haman, Mordecai, King Ahasuerus Xerxes, Queen Esther, Susa Shushan, Persia, Esther 3-7. Summary of the story. Although not set in Israel proper, the book of Esther shows a powerful Persian official, Haman, enraged because Mordecai the Jew would not bow down to him. Later, when the king sought to honor Mordecai, Haman was humiliated and eventually executed. Signs of outshining the master dynamic in reverse. Here the pattern is slightly inverted. Haman is the apparent master, yet he is desperate not to be outshone by Mordecai. We see how insecure leaders behave when they fear being eclipsed. Demand for excessive honor. Haman wanted everyone at the king's gate to bow. Esther 3 verses 2-5. Enraged by a single man's refusal, all his honors meant nothing to him so long as Mordecai did not bow. Manipulation of the king. He induced the king to sign a decree to destroy all Jews. Esther 3 verses 8-11. Consequences. Reversal of honor. Haman had to lead Mordecai through the city, proclaiming, "Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor." Esther 6 verse 11. Execution on his own gallows. Haman was hanged on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Esther 7 verse 10. Elevation of Mordecai. Mordecai rose to Haman's high position. Esther 8 verses 1-2. Lessons learned. Leaders who fear being outshone often overreact and destroy themselves. If you are rising in favor like Mordecai, it is wise to stay humble and patient, letting God manage the jealous. From the master's side, demanding tribute and eliminating rivals betrays insecurity and invites God's judgment. Part 8. The Pharisees versus Jesus. Religious leaders threatened by true authority. Persons and places. Jesus, Pharisees, chief priests, scribes. Jerusalem, Galilee, Judea. Gospels, e.g., John 11, Matthew 21. Summary of the story. Jesus' teaching, miracles, and authority far surpassed the influence of the Pharisees and other religious leaders. Crowds followed Jesus, and his words often exposed the hypocrisy of those leaders. They ultimately plotted his death. Signs of outshining the master dynamic. Again, Jesus is the rightful master, but the religious leaders felt overshadowed. Their reaction illustrates what happens when leaders cannot bear to be surpassed in public esteem. Fear of losing influence. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him. John 11 verse 48. Envy of his popularity. The people marveled at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Matthew 7 verse 29. Attempts to trap him, asking trick questions to discredit him publicly. Matthew 22. Consequences. Plotting and crucifixion. They arrested Jesus, brought him to trial, and pushed for his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Loss of moral authority. Their actions exposed their corruption and hypocrisy. Eventual judgment on Jerusalem. Within a generation, Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed, as Jesus had foretold. Lessons learned. When God raises a truly anointed person, religious institutions may feel outshone and react in hostility. If you carry a significant calling, you may have to endure opposition from established authorities. From the perspective of leaders, resisting someone God has clearly anointed because of jealousy aligns you against God's own work. Part 9. John the Baptist and Jesus, the servant who refused to compete. Persons and places. John the Baptist, Jesus, John's disciples, Judea, Jordan region, John 3. Summary of the story. John the Baptist was a powerful preacher by the Jordan, drawing crowds to repentance. When Jesus began his ministry and gained greater popularity, John's disciples were concerned about losing influence. Signs of a potential outshining situation. Rising rival ministry. Jesus and his disciples were baptizing, and more people were going to him. John 3 verse 26. Disciples feeling protective, they told John, "He to whom you testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him." Opportunity for envy. John could have seen Jesus as a competitor overshadowing his earlier ministry. Consequences handled rightly. No envy, only joy. John answered, "He must increase, but I must decrease." John 3 verse 30. Smooth transition of spiritual focus. The people were redirected from the forerunner to the Messiah. John's lasting honor. Jesus later called him the greatest born of women. Matthew 11 verse 11. Lessons learned. John shows the right way to handle being outshone. Recognize your role and yield when the greater one arrives. True greatness is an embracing decrease when God's plan requires it. For us, when our student or successor surpasses us, we should rejoice rather than resist. Part 10. Lucifer's Pride, the prototype of outshining the master. Persons and places. Lucifer, Satan. God, heavenly realm, reflected in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28 understood symbolically. Summary of the story. Though these passages speak of earthly kings, Babylon, Tyre, many see in them a shadow of Lucifer's fall. He was a high, glorious being who became proud and desired to exalt his throne above God. Signs of outshining the master. Ambition to rise above God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Isaiah 14 verse 14. Forgetting creaturely limits. A created being seeking to compete with the Creator. Corrupted wisdom and beauty. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. Ezekiel 28 verse 17. Consequences. Cast down from heaven. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Isaiah 14 verse 12. Ultimate judgment reserved. He will be finally cast into the lake of fire. Revelation 20 verse 10. Cosmic conflict and human suffering. His rebellion set the stage for spiritual warfare throughout history. Lessons learned. All human attempts to outshine rightful masters echo the primal rebellion of Satan against God. Pride in gifts, position, or beauty, without submission, leads to ruin. The safest place is under God's authority, content where He has placed you, and using your gifts for His glory, not to compete with Him or with others. Overall lessons from these 10 examples. Favor and gifting attract envy. Joseph, David, and Mordecai all experienced backlash when their excellence outshone others. Authority is easily threatened. Saul, the Pharisees, and insecure leaders like Haman and Adonijah reacted with hostility when they felt overshadowed. Challenging God-ordained masters is dangerous. Korah, Miriam, and Absalom show how spiritual and familial rebellions often end in judgment. Humility protects. John the Baptist and supremely, Jesus himself modeled how true greatness often chooses to decrease, submit, or suffer rather than grasp for position. Pride is the root. From Lucifer to human rebels, the desire to outshine the master springs from pride, which Scripture consistently portrays as the prelude to a fall. The recurring pattern is clear. In families, kingdoms, religious communities, and even in heaven's history, those who try to elevate themselves above their rightful masters bring ruin on themselves and others. The biblical wisdom that parallels never outshine the master is not about flattery or manipulation. It is about honor, humility, and knowing your place under God's order, trusting Him to exalt you in due time.